If you ask yourself a question, what is the future look like? It looks like this crowd of people. So you are the future. I'm not going to tell how it's going to look. You're going to design it. Just going to help you in how to use the best innovative tools to build the best possible future. And just to give another example of coincidence, 20 minutes back, I've got a WhatsApp message from a friend from Madrid who happened to be in Mexico City right now. So I'm here just 2 days, and he happened to be here. And he's a very good friend of mine, and this is another example. If we do the things that we love and get excitement, the life puts everything in place for good things to happen. And I strongly believe, just to continue the story, because I'm going to have a dinner with a friend of mine from Madrid who has a company in IT. This connection, this dinner tonight that happens randomly to Mexico City, on a different continent from where I live and he lives, is going to create another great opportunity for the future. So do what makes you excited, follow your excitement, and you will connect with the people who are excited about the same thing. And as this excitement grows, a new, better future is going to emerge. All right, this was just like a more lyric introduction to how things come together if you feel excited about that. So now, I'm super happy that also that coincidence happened at the MIT Media Lab, and also Ron was a student at my class at the MIT Media Lab, and we just learned later that we are connected again, which is super exciting too. So, straight to the point. Transformational socio-technical design, what it is. So it's all about transformation from what is to what's going to be. It's a socio-technical because there is a social part, which are human beings, which are us, and a technical part, which is technologies, and design. So how to design such technologies that's going to transform not only technologies itself, but also human lives. And I'm happy to be here. So I had another day before. So a good friend of mine, Mario from Guadalajara, professor, introduced me to the most important part. So I'm happy to be here and enjoy more than just this lecture. But now, where I'm coming from? I'm coming from the MIT Media Lab. There are two buildings at the MIT campus, but these two buildings are super special. Let me know why. It's because of the principles. All the people in those two buildings follow these principles. By their nature, it's not because they arrived there, it's because they live this way. So it's very unusual, but at the same time, these people following these principles are people that are revolutionary, that are disruptors. Let me just give you an example. Right below corner, learning over education. Because education is something that is given to you, while learning is something that you do to yourself, and so forth and so forth. What did I do at the Media Lab? And I still have very strong connections with MIT Media Lab. I worked on persuasive cities. Persuasion is something that leads to a behavior change. So how city can become persuasive. And I'm going to discuss a lot of examples, and I'll give you tools how to make a city persuasive. And the question is, why do we need that? Why do we want a change? It's because we all know there are a lot of issues that we better change sooner than later. This is one of those. And then if you really think about mobility and all the effects on the environment, that there are companies that already say, okay, we are changing, so we are producing different kind of cars that don't leave that kind of painful footprint after that. At the same time, we think, oh, if there will be better cars, everything's going to change. because we believe that people are rational. Are they? If people were rational, there wouldn't be these kind of pictures on the packages of cigarettes, right? So there is still this human factor involved. So people are not that rational as we might think. And let me give you another example. So I recently, like a couple of months ago, I flew to Santiago, Chile. We looked at their public transportation system. And we see, it's another place where there has to be a change. And again, one way to look at it is to change the infrastructure and to possibly cope with better way how to deal with crowds of people and enable them to be transported through the city. But what it causes is this human factor, which is fare evasion. So people are evading fares. And for multiple reasons. And this is a consequence of the infrastructure or maybe not that well established infrastructure. So that's an example how what we have influences how do we behave. And then if we imagine, okay, let's look at the ideal future, a smart city, let's say so. On this picture, we see windmills, solar panels, smart homes, cogeneration, plants, and so forth. And engineers, all spectrum of engineers can make this happen, right? And they're going to do it, and they're going to do it more and more efficiently. But what's missing on this picture? Right. So how to make humans to live in this ideally engineered environment in a way that they utilize it in a proper way. Because we know if we have a new engineered thing, it can be this microphone, for example. I can talk through it, but I can also maybe hit the nails. So we are not ever guaranteed if we could create a new innovation whether people are going to use it in the proper way. So there has to be another layer of engineering, which I call social engineering. So we need to wrap all the technological innovations in a social wrap so that people would understand how to use it and possibly use it in the proper way and actually in the end benefiting from that. And if we think about designs around us, so we constantly look for how to improve city experience services. I've collected some of the pictures from the internet that kind of make some story about what happened when we tried to apply design. So here is one way to design things around what we have. I think this is quite popular. So we sometimes design environments, but then human nature finds their way around environments that are not convenient or not properly designed. And then sometimes when we already, as designers or like a city government, see that, okay, people are not really walking the sidewalk, they are just crossing the ground. They put the sign, but still, as you can see, there is a person there really in the middle of green area, like just ignoring all the signs. And then it all leads to this kind of situation where people are not sure what we're going to do. So there's too much of information abundance, signals, and then people are lost. What actually do we need to do? And then coming back to my experience yesterday, there is another example that I saw yesterday. So although the cause might be very serious and very supportive, but that is an example of how people come up with different ways how to make a change happen. And why sometimes the change is not happening. And here I'm going to start giving you core tools that you're going to be using later in a workshop and possibly in the future in your studies and designing better cities and mobility in the cities. So you need to remember one thing. Not all of the new innovations are going to succeed. And why? Because there is the red circle. The red circle are people that won't change in a specific question. Maybe you know some of your friends and relatives that you think they do something which is not good, and you tell them 27 times, and they just say, I'm not going to change. Anyways, so we need to be mindful. We can design the best service, the best engineering. There will always be people that are not going to change. So just keep that in mind. On the other end of the spectrum, there are green people who are self-motivated. If they want to change, for example, start riding a bike, they will just start doing it. They don't need any extra motivation. They're self-driven in a specific behavior. And then there is this circle in the middle, which I call January 1st. Do you know who these people are? New Year's resolutions. And you know, most of the times, I don't know statistics, but if you think about yourself or your friends, usually the resolutions end around February. So this is the target group for us. And I'm sure in Mexico City, there are people who are January 1st in terms of being more active in mobility and using more eco-friendly mobility. So this is our target group that already are willing to change. It's just a different kind of other aspects that have to be changed or fixed or improved. And now, if we think about what are the components, so this comes from the social cognitive theory, which says that if there is a behavior, whether that's happening or not happening, it has two influencers. So environment around the person can influence the behavior. So for example, the bike lanes are not existent, the bike share system is far away. Those are environmental factors. Whereas attitude is what people have in their heads. For example, biking is not safe, or biking is extreme, or I don't know how to bike. That's another thing. So these two factors or these two areas have to be very well aligned so people maintain the behavior, or if the behavior is not happening, we need to look in these two areas to find reasons why it's not happening. Because if you would ask everyone, most of the people would say, okay, current cities, like quite many cities, have organized their streets according to the left-hand side. So private automobiles are the kings. The streets, in terms of the square meters, are dedicated for the cars, and then trucks, walking, public transit, and cycling. But if you would ask what would be the best for everyone, everyone would say, okay, the green side. But what's happening in reality? And this is a statistics. It's in German. It's from Vienna, from the capital of Austria in Europe. And this is what they have done with the bicycling infrastructure in 5 years. They have improved. More bike lanes, more bike racks, and so forth. But what is the observation is that they didn't have the same increase in bike ridership. And this tells the story that this triangle has to be complete. So even though they improved the infrastructure, which is in this case is the city, like bike lanes and bike racks, and they expected, oh, people would ride more bikes, but that really didn't happen at the level as the improvements in the infrastructure. So the reasons have to be here. So there is something in the heads of the people. And as we did research before, there are three main areas why people, at least what they have in their heads as the reasons. One is safety. I mean, people say it's dangerous, so you can get hit by a car and so forth. That's one. The other is comfort. So sometimes it's not pleasant because of the rain or weather conditions, or if you ride to work, you don't want to sweat. So that's also the comfort. And the third usually is the infrastructure itself, whether it is good or bad, whether it's accessible, like as a bike share, or not. And let me give you an example from how to cope with the attitude. And this is something that I recently read. And may I ask you, what do you think is in this box? They're shipping bikes. But at the first glance, it looks like it's shipping TV, right? Why did they do that? It's because it was a high cost of the damaged bikes. So people who handled the packages were seeing their bike and they didn't care, so they were dropping the boxes, and the bikes actually were damaged quite a lot. So what the company decided, okay, why don't we put this picture of TV? So usually the people handling packages would handle with care, and they really decreased the cost. And this is the example how by a little slight shift into how the things look can influence dramatically the attitude and shift it to the positive. Now, if we think about research into motivation, usually research motivation says you can change people's attitudes by two elements: positive reinforcements and negative. Carrots as incentives and stick as a form of punishment. But they have huge limitations, which is what happens with the behavior when they are taken away. And the research says that usually it converts back to where it was. So it's not really a sustainable way of achieving a long-term behavior change, because if their incentive is taken away, behavior returns to where it was. And let me give you some examples. So if people would read this and the image on the left-hand side says this runs on money and makes you fat, and this one runs on fat and saves you money. So all of the people, or most of the people, would kind of agree to that. But still, is it effective? Does it achieve the change? No, there is some kind of an area between informed, whether people are informed about the consequence of their choices, and whether they really change their behavior in this question. And many cities have a lot of activities, a lot of programs in terms of the bicycling. This is just a collection that I've very quickly found on Google. So city and a campaign in bicycling, city and a campaign of bicycling. There have been more general bicycling campaigns at the level of European Union, like saying bicycling week. Week, a 1 week. Is this a behavior change or just a festival of the bikes? I don't say it's bad, it's good, but how we can achieve that these people are riding bikes beyond that week? And then I found this one, bike to work, a day, 1 day. How about the other 364 days? And I just found, okay, they have the same action 5 years later. But still, can these kind of campaigns achieve a permanent behavior change or improvement in bicycling in a city? Not really. And this is another example from Riga, from the capital of Latvia. So what they did, they really, one day, put the bamboo frames around the bikes to exemplify how much space a one car driven by one person is taking up on a street. Just to saying, okay, this is how the congestion originates, and if you would switch over to bikes, it could help. And still, you can see there were quite a good social coverage, but that's it. That was 1 day and a history. And in reality, what we would like to achieve, and also I think Mexico City wants the same thing, is to say this happening. This is a picture, I guess most likely from Copenhagen or from Amsterdam, which has a very long history in the bicycling. Now, the question is, if the motivational tools like incentives and punishments are not perfect, and if there is still a gap between informed individual knowing the consequences of the choice, but still not changing behavior, is there any other way? Is there any other source of influence? There is. I don't know how many of you followed my up-looking and finger, but this is an example from this picture. We as human beings have so powerful source of influence, which means other people. Whenever we see other people doing things, We learn, we compare, we compete, sometimes we collaborate. And that's so inbuilt that we don't even think. When I pointed with the finger up and looked up, most of the people, or those who looked up, you didn't think what's there. You were just like, okay. It's because we inherited that. This is how we live. So this is the source that we can, if we use it for the designs of the better cities or the interventions to encourage people to live healthier or to take care of their well-being, that's the source to look at. And that was the fundament of my PhD dissertation from 2014, social influencing systems. So how the social psychology can inform the design of technologies to make a change happen. This is a framework that I proposed based on my research. It has 7 social influence features, and they are interconnected, and some of them, they are more effective to change people's minds. Some of the features are more effective to change people's behavior right away, to get them into participation, and some of the features are effective for combined effect, attitude plus behavior, which is called engagement. And there is a publication on that. So for you who want to really look into the 7 social influence features and how they can be designed, that's for you. And now let me give you some examples. This is a slide with screenshots of weather forecast. Imagine you want to change your behavior. You want to do more exercising in the morning. So one thing that and exercising outside, one thing you would like to make sure is whether the weather forecast is good or bad. And without those 2 circles on the top with the 74 and 11, you are informed only about the weather. But imagine those 74 and 11 tells you how many other people are right now outside doing exactly what you are willing to do. So you are a person of January 1st, you want to do more running in the morning, and on top of the weather forecast, which says it can be good or bad, there are other people outside. And if you see other people are outside doing the same thing that you want to do, what are your excuses then? This is a feature which is called social facilitation. You see other people at the same time doing the same behavior that you want to do. The same thing scaled up to the city level. Because what's the limitation with the phone apps? Do you know the limitation? For the phone, for the smartphone, who is in control? A user of the phone. But if we have a design of a system for a city and it's implemented like this on a street, who is in control? No one. The screen reflects the actual data or actual behavior of what's happening. In this case, it shows the biking speed is 12 miles per hour and the car speed is 9 miles per hour because we can see cars are stuck in the traffic, bike lane is empty, we don't see even bikes. But the sensors were there, they counted the bikes and they measured the speed. So if you're now sitting in one of those cars and you look at the screen, you become informed, and not even informed, but you start to contemplate, maybe I should take the bike next time because bikes go faster and I'm sitting like everybody else in the car without moving. But imagine the same street without that screen. You don't need to imagine. You just walk outside. All the streets. None of the streets tell you what's happening. The persuasive city is a city that informs you and in such a way drives you to think about what change you can do to improve this issue. And introducing the framework for persuasive cities, it's very simple. So we have a data source, which usually has sensors. In previous case, it's a speed sensor on the street that is giving us the data. The next layer on top of the sensitive layer in a persuasive cities framework is smartness, and there has been a hype about smart cities for many years, so how we can make more sense of the big data. So we use big data tools to understand different kind of groups of people having different behaviors. And the top one, which very rarely is even considered. So what do we do after we have learned from the big data about what the situation is? We need to make a change. How to make a change happen? We need to introduce behavior change interventions in the city. And this is where the persuasive cities layer comes into the game. Here is just a brief copy of a newspaper from a city in Germany, Nuremberg. It represents the idea that we have as a project there. They also have the bike counter on the street, but it's not enough that there is just one bike counter in a one street. We have to populate more streets and give more awareness of the biking dynamic, and also use it in a way that people, when they see the bike dynamic, they would also consider riding bikes themselves. And one thing that we did in Boston and Cambridge area, this was a research at MIT Media Lab. 2 years back, fall 2015, we engaged 14 companies from the area, actual companies, actual people commuting to the work and back. And we asked this intervention to be visible on the screens in their offices. So that was a prerequisite for the study to be run. What did we do? So all the employees that signed up for the research reported how do they commute. Do they ride bike? Do they ride car? Do they use metro or bus transit? But we looked only in the biking statistics. And we instantly organized the companies in the rankings according to the 4 parameters. And those rankings were visible in each of the companies on the screen. So imagine you are an employee or you are a student, if there would be, and there was one unit, which is MIT Computational Cognitive Science Group. So you would see, oh, there are actually other people from my unit riding. So sometimes in the large companies, you don't know. And then you can see how many people of your company is riding. And this screen really instantly projects where your company stands. So if you are an employee, you see your company is number 2, and you see that this is about biking to work and back, and you want your company to succeed, you know what to do next day. So, and we have found that this study and this implementation of the screens with the rankings represent the competition, and also they facilitate the cooperation within the same company, so more people would, from the company ride, really contributes to the overall perception of the people about engaging into the bike riding to work. And that's another publication if you want to read more. It's accessible through Google Scholar and similar search engines. Now, usually what I do, this is a template, and usually I send it out as a homework, but because it didn't go out before this event, we're going to do this in our workshop. But for your information in advance, this is how we need to define a behavior change. So if we really want to make a change happen, we need to be sure what do we want to change and be very specific, because usually why many things fail, because expected change is too big, right? We kind of have the mindset, let's save the world. Can we do that? Maybe, but in the long term, but what we can do small things and every day. So this template helps you to narrow down your scope of saving the world into one practical thing to be achieved. People, it's a target group, and it's not about the gender, it's not about age, it's not about education, it's not about income. It's about the second, about their behavior. If there is something in their behavior that maybe is not that good. So that defines the target group. And then we would project what kind of change, what the future behavior we want to have for the same people. That's very fundamental, easy, but very important to start with. And then we have to have a metric, how we're going to measure this specific behavior. And then on this metric, we have to have measurement today and our expected measurement tomorrow. This is a very fundamental thing to start any change. Your own, your friends, your colleagues, your city. And let me show you examples that we thought about at the MIT Media Lab. And there's an ongoing project right now. It's about using stairs as an elevator. This is a picture I found online. It's not really the stairs behind the open elevator. It's just a poster. But still, and I heard some of you laugh, because we kind of know it's just about a choice. But we know what is the impact of our choice. The more we use elevator, the less active we become. I sometimes laugh that elevators are for refrigerators and people who can walk. And of course, there is another objection. People shouldn't walk to 35th floor. So elevators are for that. But if there is just a 1 floor, 2 floors, 3 floors, stairs are good. And then we define, we use the template. So who is the target audience? We have people working on the 2nd or 3rd floor. What is their present behavior? It's only those people who work on the 2nd and 3rd floor who use elevator. That's the target group, not everyone, just those who use elevator. What do we want as a future behavior? So that they will start using stairs. What metric do we use? And let's be very technical. How many times elevator goes from the ground floor to the 2nd or 3rd, and just count the times. The system works, it's easy to measure. And then just a hypothetical number, let's say it's 100 times per day, and the future metric would be 50. So let's say in 2 months, we would decrease from 100 to 50. So it's quite easy to follow up. Now, let's look at the ground floor at the Media Lab. So there are 2 entrances, and then there is an elevator, which is located in the very center of the building, so you can see it. And there are some hidden blue stairs. So one of those are fire exit stairs. You don't really see them. And the other one you can see only from the one entrance, which actually, again, is a kind of callback to the architecture and how much the design of the buildings influence our choices. But let's forget about that. There are always people using the stairs. There are always the green people. And they are also in the Media Lab. So if we put the sensors on the stairs, we can start counting the people. And once we get data in, and this is right now happening at the Media Lab, we can start designing interventions and projecting them on the screens in the Media Lab. And this is just the one simplified, so we can compare. This is a more sophisticated. So for example, if we are able to identify whether the people are Media Lab visitors or people are Media Lab employees, you can have the statistics and compare. So how many visitors go and use stairs and how many people, employees of the lab. So you enable the statistic to be projected in a nicer way that we're going to see soon. And by comparing, you first of all, if you are like a frequent elevator rider, you would first have this revelation, oh, I didn't know there are stairs and people are using them. So this is how it all starts. And then later, if you are the January 1st person, you start to ask yourself, so if other people are using stairs, I just need to find them, not the people, but the stairs, and start using them. So that's a visual. And if we get this statistic, where do we place it? Right there, at the elevators. So people standing and waiting for the elevators are seeing this statistic, are trying, and are getting this information about other people. So social context tells there are other people walking stairs. And this is, the next one is another study or like an experiment that we did. So as you pass the point, it extracts the data from your phone. What kind of data? Your step count. Why? Because it's an interesting data. So how many steps you make as you walk throughout the day. And then the question is, yeah, and this is where it comes from. For example, I use iPhone, so it comes from the app that I cannot delete. It's there, it counts. So it's about just get it out of there. And then if we imagine that every step can be a currency, that a person can exchange for something that person likes. And one of the ideas is if we exchange every step for one word, and then if the person is interested in writing a story, there can be a public screen where people can exchange their currency, their steps, to words that they would like to contribute to a story. But it can be anything else. So just a universal currency that you can exchange for something that you like. And there are other examples that we did at the Media Lab and other contexts beyond just the city environment. So for example, this one is about safety in a Fab Lab. So about this device next to a person pretty much informing that there are hazardous materials. And also the device can learn from how the people react after the device has informed by changing the color. And so influencing other people entering the lab and using hazardous materials. There was another project with a student from the Media Lab. It was about sedentary behavior. So our activity is not only mobility and moving around, it's also how long do we sit. And this was the chair which had the LED strip, and this was built from the scratch. So in each of the students' project, and I would encourage you to do the same thing, develop from scratch and make a demonstration. This is Media Lab culture. It's not publish or perish, it's demo or die. Or now it has deploy or die. So this is an example of how a sensor can detect how long do you sit and inform not only you, but the people around. So people would see your chair change the color to red. And somebody would come to me and say, Agnis, you're sitting too long, your chair is red. And this is another example from the grocery stores. So you purchase food, and every item is already scanned, and the data is there. It's just having a screen which tells whether that product contributes to your well-being or not. And if we have that kind of a data, we become not only more informed, but we also can see how many other people select healthy food. And out of that, we also need to be careful because there can be a one day when people purchase only unhealthy stuff, and that can backfire. And I'm not going to go into the details of this one, but this is pretty much reflecting how computers can play different roles into persuasion and influence. And the most important part here is that not always are available data of the good behaviors. So as a designers, we need to be mindful about that. In a workshop, I'm going to tell about that more. And there is, of course, the publication about the same stuff. Now coming a little bit closer to the end of the first part, which is a talk, this is what we call persuasive electric vehicle. It's not a downscaled car, it's an upscaled bike. It has 3 wheels. And this is an early prototype from a year ago. It has pedals, but now it has also autonomy and computer vision. And we were testing audio assistance in this case. And now this is a kind of an early picture of it. And imagine that as you're pedaling, you are also having the statistics. And depending whether you use pedals or you use electric assist, it can tell you where your performance stands in terms of your own previous ridership or on this vehicle or in your city. And imagine if the vehicle can change the exterior color. If it's red, you are not pedaling, you're using electricity. And if you're pedaling, it's green. So imagine if you're riding the street, people are seeing that, and if you're alone, you might not care. But then you see a crossroad and there are 5 others of these coming out and they're all green and you're only one red. So you might start to reconsider. And if you think about, this is like a moving influencer in the city, reflecting the behavior of other people. But then we can think about structures like this. And not this, the other one. But you already saw it. So again, it's a funny coincidence. I had this example before I moved to Paris. Maybe that's why I moved there. But that structure, do you know when the Eiffel Tower was built? roughly 100 and something years back. For what purpose? For the world exhibition. Today, it can become a persuader. It can be used as the communication channel. How? Like this. So those numbers in the Eiffel Tower can be any kind of statistical data that you want to collect. For example, how many bike rides happen today in Paris, or how many kilometers all the bike share bikes in a system have done. And Eiffel Tower is pretty much very visible from almost every place in Paris. And you can use colors and you can color code the whole tower if you want to. And they do it for the celebrations. So any part of the city can be overlaid with the socio-technical design to transform the behaviors. Coming back, this is the triangle. So now, and also that's for the workshop, if there is a behavior that's not happening, look into the two other areas that influence the behavior. And coming back to the very essential point about the groups, which one is our target group? The yellow one, the people willing to change. And imagine the green ones already are riding, like, let's take a Mexico City. The green ones are the people who are already riding the bikes. I saw there are people riding bikes in Mexico City. So now, when the yellow people who are willing to start riding, and quite many of them think that nobody rides or very little ride, but once we get the data and expose how many green people on your street every day is riding bike, that tells the yellow people to think about it, that maybe the perception that nobody rides is wrong. And if that happens, the green people are influencing yellow, and when it happens constantly through these interactive displays, this is what's happening. So the green eats up the yellow, and after years or months or decades, the green is so much bigger than the red that the red sometimes might feel like, okay, we are the minority here. And now, like coming closer to the very last part, not always design of the intervention produces only expected behaviors. And this is one of our studies that we did in collaboration with one of my partners from Canada. So in this matrix, if we design an innovation about behavior change, it can land in the 4 quadrants. So if we target a behavior, let's say bike riding, and we design an intervention, and we hit positively, and it increases the bike ridership. So we achieve target behavior. So it was intended, and it has a positive outcome. Sometimes, if you introduce a new thing, it also produces a behavior which is still positive, but it was unintended, but it's positive. So it contributes to the bike ridership in this case. It's all positive side. Now look at the other side when there is a negative behaviors or like contra behaviors. It's dark patterns. So in the science there has been already reviewed. So sometimes people intentionally design something that's not contributing to well-being. So we as designers need to be mindful not to do that and try to avoid if somebody tells us to do that, if we see that's a dark pattern. And what was the core of this research was if there was unintended negative outcome. So we designed for a bike riding, but for example, it causes some group of the people actually to start ride cars more for unknown reason or for the sake of the design of this feature. And we collected 12, like 6 categories of these backfires. They're also in one paper, but let me just give you 2 examples. One example is average. So you collect average of a certain behavior. And in that case, that was about university, about the dormitories. And in that study, they collected how many alcoholic drinks students consume. And they made a survey, they collected, and they calculated the average. And what they did later, like whatever the number was, like average of drinks per week or so, they communicate back to the whole dormitory. So that average for the people who drank more was an encouragement to drink less. How about the other side? So for people who drink less, that was an encouragement that, you know, on average, people drink more. So designers of this system had to do it differently. For the people who drank more, you give the information of the average. For the people who drink less, there had to be a different message sending out. So that was one backfire. And the other one, sometimes when people really care about their weight, and there are many people in need of that, this company just made a cookies and they really labeled, in this package there is only 100 calories. Pretty much they expected that people would care and just have a package and they know it's 100 calories. What was the backfire? People said, oh, if it's only 100 calories, I can have 2 or 3. So this was something that designers really didn't expect to happen. So, and there are more of these. You can look up into this paper. Now, a bit of futuristic, closure of the talk, autonomy. And this picture, maybe you cannot really see what's written there, but it says, like, police stopped the driver, and it asks, like the police person asked, does your car have any idea why my car pulled it over? So the people try to figure out what the cars did communicate. And just on this kind of funny note, we really considered what areas in a city really will be shifted and changed and transformed in the future due to autonomy. And it's far beyond cars. Cars is just one element in a city, and it's also outside of the city. But there are so many other, and we have collected 14 areas that's going to change in a city in terms of autonomy. And again, that's a very recent publication from the last week, American Conference of Information Systems. So it's out and you can read. And the very final one is about artificial intelligence, and certainly it's going to have a huge influence on how we're going to design for our future cities. And this is just reflection that, first of all, we shouldn't be worried. We are in control, and just to not make people worry too much, the science fiction movies, they are great. They are for their own purpose. But not having the engineering background and having the psychology background, I can tell you, people are designing. And that's going to be, computers are going to help us, and computers can do a lot of for us. But we are still designing. And if you have a conversation about artificial intelligence with anybody, you can ask, and if you have a person who says, oh, artificial things going to rule us, ask one question. What's going to be the purpose of artificial intelligence for doing that? What's the purpose? So that's a good question to answer in the near future for everybody of us. That's my website. Welcome to see all of the work, all of the papers and everything. And soon we're going to start the workshop. Thank you.